well, I could do this, I could do that. What if that doesn't work? Well, I could do this instead. And the creativity that comes out from the energy of anger is a beautiful thing. But so often we think, oh, anger, if I express it at all, I'm going to hit someone, or anger, if I express it at all, people will think I'm a bad person, or and we hold it down instead of using it to um yeah, to
Well,
create.
today, folks, we're very lucky because we've got my very good friend Alan Sharland, who is a conflict coach. And after all the videos that I did on tolerance, he is absolutely the man that deals with this 24/7 every day. He lives, sleeps, eats, and breathes this because that's what he does for a living. So I thought there's no better man that we can bring in to get an alternative perspective on the stuff that's been addressed. So thanks for joining us, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm a bit worried I might have a bit froggy throat, but I've got some water. So once I get going, I'll be well on my way.
Good man. We just need to warm you up. So I'll give a little intro to how I met Alan. So back in, I believe it was 2002, 2003, that sort of
So
region.
yeah. Hmm.
I decided that I was going to train in Reiki and do Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 in a weekend. And on that course, I met Alan. Now, I can say that Alan and our other friend, who we're still in contact with, Annette, are the only reasons I went back for Reiki 2, because I really didn't like it. I didn't agree with it. And it was retrospectively one of the best things that I ever did. So I've known Alan ever since then. We've been friends. I've got to know him and his work, and we've had some great fun as well, including our yin and yang weekends. But maybe that's too much information too soon. So, Alan, would you like to give a little intro to what who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, thanks very much, Adam, for inviting me to this. It's a fascinating topic. So, yeah, I've been a mediator since 1994, and conflict coaching, which is another thing that I do, which is one-to-one support for people experiencing unresolved conflict, was something which we actually developed in West London when I was director of a mediation service. In 2008, and we've kind of expanded on that ever since. So I provide conflict coaching, which is one-to-one support for people, and I train people in conflict coaching as well. So yeah, it's something I've been doing for 30 years, and yeah, as you say, I kind of live and breathe it, and struggle with it, and come through it, and help other people with it, etc. So for me, it's always about being creative in response to conflict, and the idea of tolerance, which we're looking at today, is one of those concepts that can be quite stagnating for us. When we tell ourselves we're being tolerant, in many ways it means we stagnate in the way that we're responding to a conflict. So for me, it's interesting to explore how the word and the idea is used, and how it shows up in perhaps causing us to stick in unresolved conflict situations.
And how did you get involved in conflict coaching? What was the driver?
Well, yeah, I'll have to be concise on that, because the model of mediation that we used where I worked was one which acknowledged that sometimes if people don't want to meet in a mediation, then a lot of what we do with each individual can help them to create ways of responding more effectively anyway. And because it happens so often, we thought, well, why don't we just offer a service which is just a conflict coach and one person, so not involving the other person at all, if they didn't want to participate in mediation. And what we found was we set up this kind of process, which is the one that I practice now and I train people in, where we put out some free adverts across London. Because we were a charity, we were able to advertise free. Um, and it was staggering how many people contacted us. We'd get, for a charity, this is a lot. It might not sound a lot to people. We get kind of 20 phone calls a day asking for conflict coaching when we put it out there that we were offering it. And so it developed from the model of mediation that we already used, which is always about trying to help people resolve things, but usually it's about them coming together in a meeting. But what we were finding was sometimes just the initial meeting we had with people before any consideration of joint meeting would help them to create changes by themselves anyway. Sometimes they didn't even want a joint meeting because they'd kind of taken an action that resolved it by themselves. And that's kind of what led to the development of conflict coaching, the recognition that we don't have to depend on the other person changing before we can resolve a difficult situation for ourselves. And so we've kind of developed it from there. So yeah, that's kind of how it evolved, and it was the first service in the UK to be publicly offered back in 2008, and we've been using it ever since themselves.
So what you're saying is people come to you when they think someone else is the problem, and what specific problems drive them to seek some sort of resolution? What is the driving force that brings them to you? We know it's another person, but what are the issues?
Yeah, I think sometimes just realizing that what they're doing isn't working, but again, recognizing that they can play a part in it improving instead of saying they've got to change. All my problems are because this person is like they are. They're not changing. I've got to make them change. It's about people acknowledging that they have a lot of power, or I don't know if they necessarily acknowledge it at the time, but they think there's got to be a better way than me being just constantly at war with this person. What can I do differently to look after myself better, to actually deal with this in a way that feels good to me and better to me, and like I'm not stuck and powerless, etc. And so they come, people have to kind of be willing to acknowledge there's more they can do. And when I say more, even that sounds like criticizing. It's that there may be a possibility of them doing something different to what they're doing now, because they're just finding that what they're doing isn't working for them in terms of improving the situation they've got with this other person as they will see it. They'll see the other person as they're the problem, they're the one in the wrong, I'm a victim, etc. And nothing wrong with having those views. It's just that they're very stagnating. They're very disempowering if we believe them to be true, that nothing can improve until that other person changes. And people spend their whole lives trying to change other people rather than looking at what they can do to help themselves to get to where they want to go. So yeah, generally people have recognized it as a problem, but they recognize that what they're doing isn't working, and they just seek support through conflict coaching. It's a creativity supporting process, I would say, but that can sound too flowery to some people. It's basically about saying, I want someone to actually just sit down and listen to me and help me think through why I'm not getting anywhere with this, and to help me to create something different for myself. And that's simply what conflict coaching is. It's providing that support, that space to be listened to, and then helped to create other ideas for themselves. So I don't come up with magic formulas for people. They've got to do the work to create stuff. But my skill is in making sure they feel listened to and then being helped to think through what other options there might be for them, to create them for themselves, to see that they do have the power to create those better answers for themselves.
And what are the motivating forces, the main things that get people to think, right, we need help with this, we need to contact Alan?
I mean, you just couldn't box them. There's so many things. It could be about relationship between a parent and a young person or a child. It could be the parent coming. It could be the young person coming. It could be about an ex-partner wanting access to their offspring that they had with someone that they've separated from. It could be about a neighbor difficulty. It could be about a workplace difficulty. So there's no kind of boundaries to what the kind of issue could be, but it's almost always going to be that there's a challenge that they're facing, either with the relationship that they've got with that person. So they may see the other person as a bully, or they may have been accused of being a bully. And so what they're looking for is something that means that even if the other person isn't involved, they can create a better outcome for themselves than the one that they felt stuck in for what can be some time. If I give you an example, and there's so many I could give you, it would take up 2 hours of video time. But if I just give you one that's just come off the top of my head, I did a session with a guy once who was very, very angry with his ex-wife and had all sorts of negative words to say about her because he saw her as deliberately obstructing his ability to see his child that they had together. And this had been going on for some years. But at the time of us meeting, his offspring was, I think, 17. And I was asking him various questions about his situation, so what is it that means you find it so difficult to see her? What have been the problems in the past? How's your communication be, etc., etc. And he just went, and he suddenly realized, as a consequence of talking it through and reflecting on the questions, that his daughter's now 17. He's had a problem for about 6, maybe 10 years, not getting access to his daughter. Now, up until she was 16, his wife was able to decide whether he could see his daughter or not. But he suddenly realized that while he's been so obsessed with demonizing his ex-wife and focusing on her as the problem, he's lost track of what the actual issue was that they fall out over. And now circumstances have changed, and he's quite able to just make direct contact with her himself. Now, that might seem so simple and obvious, but when we've got so obsessed with our demonization of another person and lost focus on the thing that we want, we can often miss the fact that circumstances have changed such that we can actually get what we want much more easily than we thought it was going to be. We saw the other person as the obstacle, but it was our thinking, it was our awareness, it was our approach that is stopping us from getting what we want. And that would be true in so many of the cases of the people that I support through conflict coaching, that often they suddenly kind of look into the sky and think, there's a way around this. I keep banging my head against this person, but actually there's actions that I can take that improve my situation. And for me, the thing about tolerance and why we've called this about how tolerance makes us a victim is that we tell ourselves, oh, I'm putting up with them, I'm putting up with them, I'm putting up with them, but they're horrible to me, they're horrible. And we make it about a personal thing with the other person, and we say we're tolerating them. But often what that means is we stop looking at what we can do for ourselves. We tell ourselves we're powerless because we're dependent on them to change. But actually what we do is we lose our focus on, what do I want here? How can I create that for myself? What if they don't change? Why do I make that so crucial for me to be happy and to find my, what I call, place of peace? What is it that stops me from getting to where I want to go? Because I've told myself I'm a victim and they're the cause. Whereas we don't even have to talk about victim and perpetrator when we make our focus, what do I want and how can I create that for myself? Yeah, I forgot your original question, but that's the kind of the essence of what conflict coaching is about, is that we're supporting the individual in creating something towards what they want and not focusing on demonizing and being at war with the other person. And it can be hard to let go of that. We say the other person is the problem, but often it's that we've just stopped looking in the right place. We're not looking at ourselves and what we want. We're looking at them and demonizing them. And if you consider all the energy that goes into that for some people sometimes, and how that energy could be redirected as a focus on creation of what they want and not being dependent on the other person changing, when you can kind of see how much energy goes into that, that's negative and not helping us at all, that we can direct into creating something new, it's a big change when people realize that they have that capacity, or acknowledge that they always have had that capacity more correctly.
So let's look into that. Let's look about this this thing about how we become a victim when we tolerate things. So I'd really like you to sort of elaborate on that issue right there.
Yeah. So so say there's something that someone's doing and I think, oh, I wish they wouldn't do it, but I'll put up for it for a little while. And then, they keep doing it. I say, well, I try not to rock the boat. I don't want to upset anyone, so I'll keep going. I'll just tolerate it. But then it gets to a point where it's like, God, I wish they'd stop doing it. It's really pissing me off. Why don't they consider me? Why don't they, why are they being so inconsiderate and rude to me? So we start to get to a place where we feel it's being done to us rather than it's just a thing that's happening. So we can then start to tell ourselves that we're a victim of some kind of deliberate attack. This is kind of the journey. At first it's just a small thing. We say, oh, that's a bit disturbing. But I'm sure it's just a one-off kind of thing. And then it's happened another time and then another time. And in time, we start to think they're being selfish. We start to create names and labels for them about how bad they are, while we're just sitting there saying nothing about it. We're not doing anything about it. We're rendering ourselves powerless by not doing anything about it. And we're telling ourselves that they're doing it deliberately. Now, sometimes it might be deliberate, but usually they're just doing their thing. They might be having a party. So they're having a party, that's it. They're not doing it deliberately to us to upset us, but we may hear it that way. And the more it goes on, the more we tell ourselves that actually we're suffering their actions. But all the time, we're not doing anything. We're making ourselves a victim by being powerless. We're not taking any action. And I mean, if I give you an example of how bad it can get, there was when I was at that place that I was saying about working there, we had a police officer referred a guy to me to try to help him. And he'd been involved in a neighbor dispute, and ultimately got to the stage he was so angry about it, he made a firebomb and threw it at the house of his neighbors. Now, unfortunately, no one was injured, but it shows how extreme he was. He went to prison for, I think, it could have been 2 or 3 years because of the extremity of what he'd done. But his belief was he put up with it for so long, it was justified. You know, they needed to learn a lesson. And when we went through his history, if the people next door to him did something, he would always do the same thing back. It was kind of a tit for tat thing. So, you know, something was thrown over his fence, he'd throw something back. If they said something rude over the fence to him, he'd say something back. If, some music was played, he'd play some louder music to get him back. So it became this kind of parallel journey where he told himself he was justified in doing it because of what they did to him. Now, at no time was he spending time trying to resolve the issue. He was just entering into a war. And so, as is often the case in war, the end of it is often thought to be by doing the bigger thing that completely obliterates, the other person, as we see in various wars around the world and historically. But his view was always that he was the victim, not recognizing that throwing a fire bomb at someone makes them the perpetrator and them the victim and him the perpetrator. But this is the mindset we can get to. We get so involved in making them the enemy, we completely overlook what we're doing, which is adding to the problem. And we tell ourselves, I'm the victim, I'm just hitting back. I'm just getting them back. And you can often have that kind of dynamic can often happen in bullying allegations as well. People who feel bullied will often, if they really consider their own actions, they've done quite bad things back, but they'll say it's justified because I'm the victim, because I put up with it for too long. And this can often be the feature. I'm being tolerant. And at first it feels like, yeah, I'm doing it because I'm the good person. I'm the morally better person, or I'm just a kind person. I don't like getting into arguments. But when it escalates and they say they're really doing this deliberate to me, I'm the victim, and there's no action to try to resolve the situation. So through constructive means, not going around and bashing the person up, then we maintain that kind of position that I'm the one who's suffering, I'm the victim. I was trying to be accommodating, but look how they're treating me. They're being disrespectful. And in many of those situations, people just haven't said anything. It's that kind of mind reader thing. They should know that they're upsetting me. Okay, how would that happen? Well, they should know. And how might that be possible? There's been no communication, or there's been other actions where it's meant that the person hasn't contributed constructively. If they have gone round, they've gone round and been abusive to the person. And so then they're seen as a perpetrator as much as they perceive the others to be. So it gets so mixed up and complicated because of the focus on the other person instead of, okay, what do I need here? This is happening. What do I need? What's most important to me? How can I most effectively move towards that? What if they don't change? What can I still do to support myself, etc.? So it's always focused on ourselves and what's best for ourselves rather than what's the worst for them. It's quite often an interesting thing to look at. Am I wanting what's worse for them, or am I wanting what's best for me? And that shift of focus can often mean we let go of that sense of tolerating them, and we're just dealing constructively with the fact that something's happened that we feel a bit upset by.
That's interesting. But how does that work if, say, you've got a noisy neighbor that's playing loud, always loud, you've knocked on the door, you've said, please keep the noise down, never happens, keeps going on and on and on. Where's the resolution in a situation like that?
Well, there may not be, how can I put it? There may not be immediate resolution, but it's whether our actions are targeted towards what's best for us. You say gone around and asked nicely. Great, that's a good start, because it's not making the other person feel that they're being attacked. So it's still maintaining a one-sided thing that we're not tolerating when we do that. We're doing something which is constructive for ourselves in the long term. Because if I do go around and call the person a bastard and they're ignorant and whatever, I'm making it worse for me, because they'll then say, I've got this mad neighbor coming around who's threatening me and abusing me. So I've already made it worse for me in the way that I act. But if I do have to do something like draw upon the local noise team or the local council, it's not about not doing that. It's just about how we go about doing that. As I say, do I phone up and say, there's these bloody bastards next door and they're fucking pissing me off, and you shouldn't have moved people like that in next to me and all that kind of stuff. It's like, look, you say that you're here to kind of sort out noise pollution or noise disturbance. I've been around, I've asked them, they haven't responded. I feel I've done whatever I need to do. So I'm afraid I need to call upon you. So I'm still doing it in a way which is constructive and not worse for me. Because if I take the first step, they're going to say, oh, we got a nutter here, etc. So they're immediately not wanting to hear what I have to say because I'm not expressing myself effectively. But if I do it in a very measured, considered way, that's best for me. That's best for me in the long term, because I'm contributing towards it being improved. And sometimes that complaint can be enough for it to stop. But if it still keeps going, I still have the capacity to draw upon those other things available to me. But I've got to treat it more like a project than as a personal attack. Because the second I still make it about them rather than the noise, I'm still making it personal, and I'm getting pissed off and I'm getting angry with them. Whereas if my focus is on the noise, that's what I'm looking to change. And in a way, I kind of speak from personal experience with this, because I've had that experience, and I've had what I could say is some years of difficulty with noise over my nose, but I still talk to them. We still, I mean, whether they see me as a friend, I don't know. I mean, I have objected to their noise, but we have a chat. We stop, we say hello to each other when we pass the things. But from my point of view, I'm not against them. I'm against their noise. So therefore, I'm able to separate the two. I can sit have a conversation with them. But their noise, I'm determined I'm going to deal with. And now it's stopped. I haven't had a problem for about 3 or 4 years. But it did go on for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But at no point was I not talking to them, which might seem strange. Sometimes we think there's got to be a personal fallout. But for me, it's the issue, not the person. We have a principle in mediation, is that we challenge the behavior, not the person. So we don't make it a personal thing. We talk about what's happened rather than the person and demonize them. I mean, there's more I can say on that, but I'm wondering whether any other. I was going to say, with a bully, if I work with people who say my boss is a bully, my question always is, what is it they do that means you call them a bully? Because when you hear what they do, you can start working with, so when they do that, what would you want instead? How could that happen? How could you look after yourself in that situation when they do that? So we're not talking about the person anymore. We're talking about the actions. Because when people break it down into, well, what is it they do that means I call them bully? Well, they do this. They come up behind me in an open plan office and they point out all my problems. That's bullying me. That's embarrassing me. It's humiliating. Okay, so what would you want them to do differently? Well, I'd rather they took me into their office and spoke privately. How could that happen? How could that be possible? Well, I could send them an email. And so they start to create answers to the problem, which aren't about trying to prove that this person's a bastard. So their focus is on the problem not on the person. And these are the ways in which actually we're able to create the answer of to the problem, because we've not got stuck in a war with another person, which never is dealing with the problem, it's dealing with the other person. And that's the way that all conflicts remain stuck, is our focus goes onto the person and not onto the actions that have led to the problem. Does it make sense? I don't know if I'm
It certainly does. So take empowered action and stop blaming the other person. Take responsibility for what you're doing. Would that be a
yeah,
summary of take
yeah,
the
not
empowered approach by creating a route map to a peaceful resolution, or I would guess potentially an exit?
or yeah, if that's what feels best to do that. But the things with all of this, when I say don't focus on the other person, don't do it because you're being nice. It just doesn't work to do that. That's the thing about it. It doesn't work to make it a thing about a personal issue, because it's not going to change what your experience of their behavior is. Or it's about you looking at, if you don't like their behavior, what do you need to do to look after yourself in that? But if you make it personal, it's like we're trying to say you've got to be a different person to who you are. It's like, well, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. They are who they are. We've got to deal with our challenges of them being who they are and acting how they are.
So would you say that tolerance is the delusion of being nice?
It could be the reason that we justify our tolerance to ourselves. Yeah, I'm not going to challenge this person because I'm a nice person. They're a bad person. I'm a nice person, so I'm not going to challenge them, as if nice people don't get angry, as if anger is a bad thing. So we might have all of those beliefs that mean we don't express how we feel in a situation to ourselves, even if not to the other person. We don't acknowledge how we feel in the situation. Um, that it can arise from this idea that I'm a nice person, so I don't get angry, and so I tolerate things. But actually, what it's about is what that means is we internalize the anger, and it builds up inside and festers, as I think you said in some of your other videos on this. It festers and it's not healthy, and it can become, even manifest physically, as we know, with stress and other consequences of that stress. Um, so it is about beliefs of being a nice person, and I don't get angry because I'm a nice person, but those are false connections in my view. Anger is a beautiful thing if it's used to energize creation of change. It's a sign that we need to create change. But if we see it as a bad thing, we just put it down and put it down, and we blame the other person for us feeling angry. Um, but I'm the one feeling angry. No one makes me feel angry. It's another use of language that often indicates that we feel like we're a victim. They make me angry. No, I feel angry because of how I'm interpreting their behavior. So I'm the one even in control of that eventually. No one makes me angry. No one can come up and flick a switch on my arm that makes me angry. I'm the one who feels angry because of how I'm interpreting and responding to the other person's behavior. And that's not to accept them. It's not to say their behavior's okay, but it's acknowledging that my response to their behavior is anger. So what do I need to do to support myself and use that anger in a constructive way? So the tolerance thing can go back to that. It can be, okay, I'm a nice person, I don't get angry. Well, you do get angry, you just don't express it in a way that works for you. Um, and it's not being a bad person or a not nice person to express anger. It's an entirely, it might sound strange, that I think it's a beautiful thing when people express their anger in a way which is useful. It's so great to see the passion coming out of people. I want this to be different. How do you want it to be different? I want it to be like this. How could you create that? Well, I could do this, I could do that. What if that doesn't work? Well, I could do this instead. And the creativity that comes out from the energy of anger is a beautiful thing. But so often we think, oh, anger, if I express it at all, I'm going to hit someone, or anger, if I express it at all, people will think I'm a bad person, and we hold it down instead of using it to, yeah, to create. That's that's the beauty of anger, and most emotions as well, in one way or another. But for some reason, anger gets a bad name.
I hear you. So if anyone now is inspired to find out more about how you might be able to help them, how would they do that?
Well, if they wanted conflict coaching, I mean, I do meet with people from all over the world because of Zoom, the beauty of Zoom. So it's just a one-to-one session, up to three maximum. We don't have 20 because otherwise it means it's becoming just a dumping shop for problems. But up to three sessions, they're usually about 90 minutes. And if they want to get in touch with me, they can contact me at an address that I don't have on a banner to hold up at the moment, but I can pass it to you.
I shall
Also,
add it to the video, fella. Don't you worry. I will tag it
okay.
along at the end for people
Yeah,
that want to get in touch, and we'll put it in
yeah.
the comments. How's that? We'll put
Sounds
this.
great. Sounds
Oh,
great. Chaos conflict management. That's who I work
fantastic.
for, but the address will be with that domain added to it.
Well, cheers, Alan. Just want to thank you for your time today. And to everyone else watching the video, if you've got any questions, then do fire them away in the comments or get directly in touch with Alan and ask him yourself. I'll leave all of the details in the description for the video. And thank you for your time in following us.